So, tell me about your company. What got you involved with making gluten-free bread?
Yeah.
It's very interesting. And tell us what separates your gluten-free bread from other gluten-free breads.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'll give you the quick story. So we're the Happy Campers Gluten-Free Bakery. And it's my wife and I. We started in 2010. And that was our first year in business school in Oregon, to Willamette University. And I met my wife a few years prior to that, and we met in college. And one of the things that sort of drew us together was our joint appetite for wellness, and obviously food is a huge part of that. But we were really interested in in anything that's good for you, that's healthy. Whether it's exercise, meditation, relationships, but of course, food is a huge part of that. So we were living a really active lifestyle and making a lot of our own food. And gluten-free was a part of this passion that we have. We both realized that we feel much better without eating gluten. So we're not celiac, even though we do have reactions, some pretty straightforward allergies. So.
And that's what I was going to ask you. Like, a lot of people think, there's no reason to go gluten-free unless you're celiac.
Yeah, right.
So maybe explain some of the benefits that just normal, healthy people can have from going gluten-free, even if you don't have celiac. Because that's the camp of, that's what I'm in. I'm healthy, but I don't eat gluten just because I think I'll be better off.
Yeah, and I would say anybody could benefit from at least reducing gluten intake, because gluten is inherently inflammatory for anybody and everybody. Some people can process that pretty well, but it's still going to be inflammatory. And overall, in our American diet, in the Western diet, we eat a lot of wheat. A lot of times we have cereal for breakfast. A lot of people snack on like pretzels or crackers, and then they have sandwiches, and there's pasta, pizza. It's just a lot of gluten, and gluten's also added to a lot of soups and salad dressings, and so it's just something that we tend to eat a lot of. And so it comes down to just variety. Rather than eating the same type of grain over and over again and getting the same type of nutrients and gluten in it, it's healthy, I would argue, for anybody to just introduce variety in your diet. So for us, for example, what we put in our bread instead of wheat is millet, sorghum, quinoa, buckwheat, and amaranth. So those are all the ancient whole grains, and they have a lot of protein, a lot of fiber, and again, it comes down to the variety. So, I find that a lot of our customers may still buy a regular gluten bread. It would probably be more of like the organic variety, something that they believe is healthier, but then they're gonna switch it up and have some Happy Campers instead, just to introduce that variety.
Are there any other grains that have gluten besides wheat?
Yeah, so it's wheat, barley, rye, spelt. So those would be the most common ones, and any of the ancient varieties of wheat like kamut, and there's many others. Spelt is actually a variety of wheat. So those would be the main ones. But really, the wheat is the most prevalent grain in the US that contains gluten. And on the flip side, there are a lot of grains that do not contain gluten. Rice and corn are the two most common ones. For us, we do not use rice and corn just because everybody else in the gluten-free industry does. So again, for us, it comes down to that variety, to offer something different. And some people, there's some research that there's arsenic in certain types of rice, and so if you consume too much rice, it may not be good for you. So again, organic whole grains. For us, we chose the ancient variety because we like the nutrition, we like the uniqueness, and the flavor, of course, as well.
So you mentioned being inflammatory. What are some of the other negative health consequences of eating gluten?
Yeah. So gluten. So because it's inflammatory, then the symptoms that it comes out can be very, very wide ranging. And I'm sure you know a lot more about this. So it can be anything from like skin reactions, headaches, joint problems.
I've heard a lot of bowel problems, like irritable bowel syndrome, leaky gut.
Yeah. And then the digestion, that's like the biggest area, right? That we're all trying to figure out and see what works best for us.
I've even heard that gluten can damage the villi in the colon. The villi that absorb the nutrients.
Yeah.
Have you heard that?
Yeah. I mean, I know that certainly for people with celiac disease. But for regular folks, I can definitely see how overconsumption would do as well. And then there's the huge topic of the type of gluten and type of wheat that we use in that's most commonly grown, at least here in the U.S. And that type of wheat has been bred to contain a lot more gluten than it used to. The number, if I remember right, it's like 50 or 70% more gluten than it originally had, because gluten in regular bread is very good in a way that it makes it stretchy, gives it a nice rise, even prolongs the shelf life, so makes it a lot more convenient product for sandwiches. But it comes at a cost of introducing something that our bodies weren't really designed to process and thrive on. So certainly the type of wheat that we use, and another good one, and I think one thing that people didn't realize, in the 70s when the whole grain movement, the whole grain bread movement began, the breads were very very dense, very hard, had to triple toast them, but nowadays the whole grain breads are really good, right? Maybe I shouldn't name any companies, but think of the major organic whole wheat breads that are out there, very widely available and very popular. But the thing about them is that when you read the ingredient label, there is gluten isolate as one of the ingredients. So the breads back in the 70s, they were very hard because they only had a small amount of gluten. Now we figured out, if we take that healthy whole grain but add like a few spoonfuls of just straight up gluten, it's going to make it softer and more stretchier, and it's going to give it more of like that, almost like Wonder Bread, right?
And probably more addictive.
Right, probably addictive, and it's funny. It also looks good on a nutritional label because gluten is wheat. Sorry, the other way around. No, gluten is protein, right? It's protein. It's not a whole protein. It's not bioavailable. You can't process it, but it's still, when you look at the ingredient label, it's still going to say a lot of protein, and but it's because we're adding a lot of just gluten isolate in whole wheat breads, and that's what makes it soft and so I certainly think that organic whole wheat breads are way better than kind of your white bubble bread, but I think we should be careful because of the amount of gluten that's in there.
Doesn't wheat even have drug-like effects on the brain? I heard that it has opiate-like substances that like drug your brain.
Yeah.
You heard that?
Yeah, I heard that. Yeah. And frankly, I'm not versed on that subject. Like I haven't done the research to talk about it fluently. But that would be a great episode that maybe you can do.
And you mentioned that it affects people's brains.
Right.
What are some of the specific ways? Like you mentioned, it can give people headaches.
Right.
Could gluten maybe even contribute to Alzheimer's?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm not, unfortunately, too informed on that subject.
I heard of a documentary called Breadhead, and it tried to make an association between, eating wheat and a lot of grains to like brain diseases like Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
It's pretty interesting.
I'll definitely have to look it up. Yeah.
Our audience should definitely explore that.
Yeah.
Now, our audience loves longevity. Could you foresee that abstaining from gluten could have longevity benefits?
Yeah, I would say yes, but if you do it right, and there are two things. By doing it right, what I mean by that is that gluten-free absolutely does not automatically mean healthy. And in fact, most of the breads, gluten-free breads, and most of the gluten-free cookies, crackers out there, whatever, I would argue are not healthy at all. The reason is that to make them really appealing and healthy, they often have a lot of sugar. They're often just plain rice flour, and I think one issue with gluten-free baked goods, especially, and I know this because that's our industry, or that's our passion, is starches. So you have tapioca, corn, and potato starch, and I think if you consume those in reasonable amounts, they're fine. But I think it's important to understand they are starches, right? It's you take the whole grain corn and you strip it of all the protein and fiber and other nutrients, and you're just left with that carbohydrate, which essentially is so quickly digestible. It's kind of like sugar. It spikes your blood sugar, and it's not a whole ingredient. It's ingredient void of nutrition that's going to spike your blood sugar and negatively impact your health. So there are a number of breads and baked goods out there in general that, like, the first two ingredients are potato starch and tapioca starch, and a lot of times, like, the third ingredient is canola oil, and then, like, the fourth ingredient is cane sugar, which is pretty wild, right? I mean, it's like wow, you're just getting, like, the whitest most processed ingredients.
Yeah, I try really hard to avoid both of those ingredients, the cane sugar and the canola oil.
Right. Yeah, so I would say definitely, so I would say rather than eating bread made out of starches, canola oil, and sugar, I would rather eat, whole wheat bread, even though it has gluten. I mean, I personally couldn't in the long run because it would negatively impact me, but then I wouldn't eat bread at all, right? Mm-hmm. So I would definitely urge people to look at ingredient label and watch out for oils, sugars, and starches, because those are ingredients that if we consume a lot of those, then we're gonna starve ourselves of protein, fiber, and a whole host of other nutrients.
From talking with people out there, being involved with gluten-free, and you must have heard lots of testimonials, have you heard any people saying that they can eat wheat in other parts of the world, like wheat in Europe, for example? I heard people say that they can't eat the wheat in America, but as soon as they go to Europe, they can eat the bread, and they don't have the same problems.
Right. No, I absolutely have. Yeah, I absolutely have. Yeah, and so there's definitely something about the wheat here in America, again, that's been bred in a way that makes people more sick, and I'm sure it's the amount of gluten. It could be some other mutations that were bred into it. A lot of them probably without really the intention to. They're more like random mutation that might have occurred. And Europe, I think, in general, I guess being from Europe and growing up there, is a little less experimental with our food. So I think the wheat varieties there are a little more ancient and a little less processed. But it's a pretty complicated subject, and I wish I knew more, because there's so much about the way we harvest wheat and what is sprayed on, how is the soil maintained, that I think that can all have significant impacts. And so in Europe, it seems a lot of people can tolerate the wheat. What I've heard is that they can tolerate it better, but they cannot tolerate it. So if they're there for a month and they have a croissant every morning, then after that month, or even sooner, they can start feeling the effects. But certainly here in the US, they probably couldn't even have one or two croissants. So there's definitely a lot greater ability to tolerate that, the European gluten.
And a lot of how wheat could be affecting people might have to do with how it's prepared, right? Because a lot of grains, they have anti-nutrients and phytic acid, and I heard if you soak the grains and if you sprout them, it makes them more easily digestible. So when you're doing your breads, do you do you prepare the grains before you start baking them? Do you sprout them or ferment them? Or
Yeah, we do. So we soak them for about 12 hours, and I wish we were able to sprout, and I think eventually we will, with our bakery still being a pretty small operation. It's something that we'd love to do, but it's just a lot more intense on the operational, logistical issues. But yeah, I mean, in the future, that would absolutely be, in the hopefully near future, that would be our goal to do that. We also found that with prolonged soaking and sprouting, the results varied too much, so the product would come out inconsistent. So that's why, at least at this stage, we're not able to sprout it fully. But the soaking, yeah, you're absolutely right. It removes some of the phytic acids and some of the other enzymes that would inhibit the absorption of the nutrients.
Now, one of the benefits I've heard from people giving up gluten and wheat is weight loss, just dramatic weight loss. Why is that?
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure if gluten has much to do with it. Gluten in particular, I feel that mostly when people start a gluten-free diet, they lose the weight a lot of the times, but I think it's because they watch what they eat. And a lot of times they will cut out, it may just be just straight up calories, even though I know, some people don't believe in calories, some people do, but I think just perhaps, even eating less food. So maybe instead of
or just less carbs, right?
Just less carbs, exactly. Yeah.
So they might just be eating more fat and more of a ketogenic-like diet.
Perhaps, yeah. Or maybe more fruit, So like instead of a bunch of Raisin Bran and toast for breakfast, they'll have a big fruit bowl or something, which for a lot of people would probably be more digestible and wouldn't have that kind of a caloric impact on their bodies. So yeah, and I think just in general, like, people watch more what they eat and think about it and plan a little bit, and and perhaps a lot of times kind of those really heavy meals like pasta with meatballs and those kinds of staples, they perhaps people started introducing salads or just thinking more about the kind of food. So I'm not sure if gluten has much. I'm pretty sure it does for some people, right? Because I'm pretty sure that some people just have a harder time processing carbohydrates in general, or maybe especially the ones with gluten. But I think for most people it's probably more just related to a better nutrition, better diet regimen in general.
So I want to ask you about your own specific testimonial, when you went gluten-free, what are the health benefits you noticed personally? Because when I went gluten-free and gave up wheat, I noticed that my thinking was clearer. I had less brain fog.
Yeah.
And what were the benefits you noticed?
Yeah, and I think that's so interesting because everybody's different. I mean, you can find patterns, but really it's so interesting how different people are. So for me, the biggest one has to do with the immune system. So my immune system functions, way better. I haven't gotten sick for a few years, so I'm, super stoked about that. It obviously has to do with other things too, but I know that gluten has a lot to do with it because when I do eat gluten, which I can rarely do, but if I do, I can within 5 minutes, I can tell that I'm starting to get congested. So I'm congesting, gotta blow my nose. And that was kind of the story of my childhood. I was just a snotty kid, and what I mean by that especially during the winter months, I would always be blowing my nose, always coughing up phlegm and that kind of stuff, which it's an allergic reaction to something, right? But obviously I never knew. But so removing gluten, instantly clears me up. So definitely, my nasal, all that, and then just that immune system overall, I guess, because it's not fighting gluten, can function better. So those would be the most immediate impacts for me.
Wow, that's awesome, man.
Yeah.
The immune system is highly linked with, if you had an improved immune system, that could make you live longer. Just that.
True.
So that could be connected to longevity.
Yeah, absolutely.
For sure. Yeah. You must have heard all kinds of testimonials from your customers.
Yeah.
What are some of the most amazing health benefits. That you heard any crazy testimonials of people saying like they've cured chronic illnesses?
Yeah.
What have you noted? What have you heard?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I if I thought hard, maybe I would think of some really good ones. But a lot of times it's related to digestion.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times, people that would just have problems because when your digestion is let's say clogged up with gluten or whatever terminology you want to use, then you're not able to absorb a lot of other nutrients that come through. So clearing up your digestion, I think is a huge benefit for people because that comes with increased energy, increased immunity, right? Because your bioflora gets repaired and eventually, and so a lot of that. Kids are always amazing, right? When like they struggle through allergies and they're always sick or have stomach cramps and and then you can fix it with a gluten-free diet.
Are food sensitivities becoming way more prevalent these days? Like sensitivities to wheat. I mean, it didn't used to be this way, right? Like now it's becoming like way more common.
Yeah,
you have any theories as to why the sensitivities, like everyone's becoming allergic to stuff, and why is that happening now?
Yeah, I do, and it's, I don't want to say a hot topic, but it's definitely one that I get asked all the time. People come up and they're like, I grew up eating gluten and I'm fine. Like what's all this stuff happening? And it's even with my parents. They're like, I eat gluten every day. I'm fine. And it's so funny because I look at them and I'm like, well, are you? Are you really fine? So just the personal example with my parents. They're slightly overweight. Their knees, they can no longer ski, which they love to do because their knees are, or my dad's knees are bad. Then they don't sleep very, very well. They're just not, unfortunately, as much as I would love for them to be. And I hope that one day they can open up to me and I can start, introducing just, wellness and health concepts to them. So I think a lifetime of consumption of gluten, you may feel that you're fine, but I would ask you, are you sleeping really well every night? Are you waking up energized, ready? You don't need any coffee or nothing because you have so much good energy, right? Coffee, right? I love the taste of the coffee. I don't particularly like the caffeine benefits because it gives me almost like too much energy. But a lot of people have to drink it, throughout the whole day just to like keep going, and then they have a cup of coffee after dinner, right? Just to make it to bed. So then, you have to ask, well, you may say that you're fine, but let's look at it, right? And could you run 5 miles comfortably, or could you hike for a few hours comfortably? So, I would say when people say that they're fine, I would, obviously you have to be delicate about it, but I would like to ask them, can you objectively evaluate your situation and let's see what fine means. It's if you're struggling through a day, then then that probably you're not fine. And then I also think, and this is, you asked about a theory, I also, I believe this from, research and personal experience, is that a lot of the food that, let me start from a different angle, that our bodies are amazing at adapting whatever you throw at them. So if you have a body and you throw McDonald's diet on them, the body can actually do, like when you think about the kind of food they're eating, can do quite well for quite a long time. But let's say, so the effects may actually not happen during your lifetime, but the changes will start happening, and then it's going to be the next generation that's going to suffer more. And these changes are going to compound, so like in the 50s, really, when we went from sort of a fresh market model to canning everything and supermarkets, right? And then 60s, 70s is when we discovered that adding a whole bunch of chemicals and weird crap to our food is going to make it last longer. And, microwaving everything and, stuff seemed great, right? So it was our grandparents that ate that way. And our parents were a little more screwed up, and now we're really getting the shaft, right? Mm-hmm. So my theory is that from gluten, eating processed ingredients, eating preservatives, and all that stuff, that that yes, it might have been fine for our grandparents, or seemingly it was fine for our grandparents, but their genetic makeup was starting to change for the worst because of that, and so it's their children that are going to be worse off, and then it's even their children after that, and they've done studies with these mice and stuff, which is awful that they do that, but I guess we learned something, that it's that when you feed a bad diet to parents, it's the generation that's worse off, and the one after that is even worse, and then eventually you have generation that's totally infertile, totally crippled. So thankfully I don't think we're heading that way, because more and more people are starting to realize it's like, man, fresh broccoli, like that's what we gotta put in our bodies all the time, right?
The dogs have been let out.
Yeah.
Speaking of dogs and pets, I'm sure there's a lot of pet owners that put their pets on gluten-free diets.
Yeah.
So talk about that. Like, are pets noticing? I'm sure pets are noticing tons of benefits from these.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And we have, I'm visiting a friend's house now, so Luna is not our dog, or not my dog, but my wife and I have 2 dogs, and one of them is very sensitive to just about all grains. So, wheat, rice, and he just gets really itchy and, starts chewing his paws and gets all red rashes. So for him, it's like a very, and it's so clear, that even a bowl of dog food with rice in it, which a lot of that does, will really make him sick. So yeah, I think it's great that we're starting to realize that, like, gosh, it's not just us, it's dogs too. And when you look at some of the dogs, that may have had a pretty poor diet throughout their lives, you can see that by the time they get to like 8 or 9 years old, you can kind of tell, they're just not spry and they're not really happy campers. But obviously we want to keep our dogs healthy, so observing them and seeing how they react to food is super important.
Yeah. Digestion. So much of health starts in the gut with digestion.
Yeah.
And if you don't have that, that's the foundation.
Absolutely, yeah.
So a lot of people could have celiac and not even know they have celiac. So what are some of the symptoms? If you did have celiac, what would you notice from that? What would be some of the symptoms?
Yeah. So it will, when you have celiac, and I know that's because my mom has celiac. So her journey was that she was having low energy and digestive issues, and this was maybe like 15 years ago, and so for a few years, for like 5 years, she was trying to figure out what was wrong. Doing all sorts of tests, and like she thought it was dairy allergy. She thought it was peanuts. Whatever, that kind of thing, and then eventually, finally, we figured out that it was celiac disease, and so so I would say digestion, that would probably be the main one, and any sort of pretty severe decrease in energy, severe headaches, but yeah, it's because it'll progress, so I'm like, my mom was fine for most of her life. It wasn't until later that she started having these symptoms, and they got worse and worse, and like right now, if she has the tiniest breadcrumb, she's like ready to go to the hospital. So hopefully you catch it before you get to that point. And it's thankfully celiac disease has become so much, the awareness has increased so much that right now, if you have those symptoms and you go to a doctor, then they will probably run a test or realize that pretty well. But celiac disease, certainly it's a pretty it's a severe reaction to gluten. It's not like some pain and aches. It's like, wow, something's seriously wrong. What is happening? I have to go to the doctor.
Yeah. Like I always say, I don't have celiac or anything, but I don't eat gluten because better safe than sorry. And there's no benefits to eating gluten. You notice that? Yeah. It's like there's no problem if you just don't eat it. And the gluten-free alternatives, there's gluten-free pasta, gluten-free bread, gluten-free everything.
Yeah.
Gluten-free pizza crust, which we had gluten-free pizza last night.
Yeah, cauliflower based. Yeah.
So it's like, if there's no downsides to going gluten-free, if there's only potential positives, why not do it just because better safe than sorry?
Yeah, no, that's an interesting point. Like, there is definitely a lot that we still don't know about a lot of things, but gluten being one of them, the wheat being one of them. And it certainly seems like a potentially, we know it's an unsafe food for a lot of people, and it's potentially has some downsides for everybody. So if you're looking from the better safe than sorry perspective, then I would say that this would probably be one of the top ingredients to, if not eliminate, then at least reduce and introduce that variety. And you said, there's so much. Obviously, it takes a little bit of work, because if you're used to sandwiches, regular pasta, all that your whole life, like, it's gonna take a little bit of work to familiarize yourself with different types of beans and different types of whole grains and legumes or whatever else you may eat. So it's really, it becomes pretty easy pretty quick. Reading labels, if you're not doing that already, it's a pain at first, but very quickly it becomes just a second habit, and you learn so much that in a year it's like a second nature, and avoiding gluten is no problem.
Is this your first time being interviewed about gluten?
Probably in this sort of in-depth setting, which I greatly enjoy. It's always so much fun to share.
What are some of like the most common questions you get asked from people, or even just your own customers? What are some questions you get asked?
Yeah, it's so funny, because when we started 7 years ago, we did a ton of farmers markets, right? And what we would when people would come up, oftentimes what we would ask, or like our leading question was, are you familiar with gluten-free? And a lot of people would be like, no. So then we explained to them what gluten is, right? Now it's so different. Like, I rarely ask that question, and it kind of depends on, like, let's say what store I go to, because I do a lot of tastings in stores. So it kind of depends. But in like a natural health food store, everybody knows what gluten is, right? So, and that's such a difference compared to 7 or even 5 or maybe even a few years ago.
And a lot of celebrities are going gluten-free and raising awareness about it. So it's like everyone knows about it.
Yeah, no, exactly. So everybody knows about it. So I would say the topic of sugar, that's the one thing that's come up this last year, a lot more than before. So I think that's great. People are asking about the sugar content and asking what sugar we use. So it's great. Our bread, has either no sugar or like sweetened with raisin juice or something like that. So the sugar content. Let's see. Yeah, some people still ask, what the heck is gluten? So I just give them the quick answer. But sometimes when people talk about, sometimes they ask questions that are similar to yours. Perhaps not as in depth, but a lot of times they like read about gluten-free or heard about it from somebody, and they're like wondering, it's like, so what is, what's this thing about? What can it do for me, right? And so that's when I try to help and educate what we know.
Are there a lot of studies going on, scientific studies, as like different control groups, like these people are eating gluten, these people aren't, and this is what happens after this amount of time? Is there anything like that going on?
That's a great question. I don't know. So for like a long-term kind of a study. It's it's interesting. I definitely know that there is articles that you can find that say that gluten is fad, or that gluten-free is no longer, nothing that's happening. And I don't know how real those articles are. And I would say we don't particularly care, either, because it's done so much benefit and difference in our own personal lives and in so many other people as well. So it's I think it's definitely here to stay, just like organic is here to stay, and just like less processed, whole foods. I very much see gluten-free as a part of this movement toward healthier food. And so it's whether people want to look at it as a fad or not, I think that doesn't really matter, because if you personally experience it and believe in it, then they can just do a lot of good. But it's at the very least, it's hard to argue with variety, right? And it's hard to argue with the fact that we eat a ton of gluten in our diet, and that there is a lot of research out there saying that maybe it's not good, right?
Yeah.
That's like the very...
People will call like anything a fad. People will just say, oh, if you don't eat genetically engineered food, you're just a hippie, and they'll just...
Right.
It's just ridiculous. I mean, GMO, that's a whole nother topic we could get into. Are your breads GMO free for people who are concerned about genetic?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, so we use organic ingredients, which is automatically non-GMO, and and it's...
Sure, why don't you show some of your breads on
Oh,
camera?
sure, yeah. So we have our buckwheat bread. We call it the Stomping Good seedy buckwheat molasses.
Move it up a little bit.
Yeah, there we go.
Awesome.
Yeah, and that's kind of our dark bread. It's mainly buckwheat flour. It's got pumpkin, flax, sunflower seeds, a little bit of blackstrap molasses, just 1 gram per slice. So it's pretty low. Just they're more for the flavor, and molasses is actually quite good for it. It's got a ton of iron, magnesium. It's essentially all the good stuff that's in the cane plant that usually gets further refined until you get white sugar, but the plant in itself has a ton of minerals and good nutritional value. So that's our buckwheat bread, and then we have our hemp seed bread. It's our newest edition. It's got organic hemp seeds, which we're really excited because those are just really good for you. A lot of protein, a lot of fiber, and 0 sugar of any kind. So,
hemp seeds aren't they like a complete protein? Yeah,
it's a complete protein. Yeah, it's an amazing plant. I hope we can start growing it more because it's it returns I think like 70% out of the nutrients. It's one of the most efficient plants. As far as returning the nutritional value that you take from the soil, and it doesn't need very much water. Grows really fast. So it's I think it requires like 25% of the water that corn does, which is pretty cool, right? I mean, we should certainly move more and more toward water.
What's your biggest selling?
Yeah, and our best seller is our good all-around sandwich bread. Call it the classy slice, and it's just a plain tasty bread. It's again just like the other breads, made from millet, sorghum, quinoa, buckwheat, and amaranth. It's got a little bit of raisin juice for it's a little bit of that sour kind of flavor. Just 1 gram of sugar per slice, and kids like it because it's like a plain sandwich bread. It's a vegan bread. All of our breads are vegan, and just making them tasty and wholesome as much as we can. Yeah.
Awesome. Is there any topics we didn't cover yet that we should have covered for this gluten-free? Anything relating to this that we haven't talked about?
One thing that I think is good to mention is the value of processed versus whole foods, right? And I know we touched on it a little bit, but again, like with gluten-free, as I was saying, a lot of it is made from processed foods, and I think just in general, for longevity, for wellness, you got to move toward as unrefined of a product of food.
It's the refined grains that it's the fiber that slows down the absorption of all the sugar.
Right.
The breads, the grains just break down the sugar, right?
Right.
So if that whole grains would absorb slower,
right,
and cause less of an insulin spike.
Right. What's exactly.
Important.
Yeah, exactly, and keep you fueled longer. And then they also, whole grains, besides that fiber, also have protein, of course, as building material, but also vitamins and minerals and other micronutrients that would be stripped down from like a starch or white rice or So I think
probably I'm guessing that the whole grains even have minerals that might even help with the absorption of sugar or helping the pancreas process the sugar.
Right.
Like I know with sugar, the unrefined sugar has a lot of chromium. Chromium is used by the pancreas to help process sugar, and so it doesn't cause diabetes and stuff.
Yeah, and that's kind of the thing, right? It's like there's so many things that we don't understand, like with these micronutrients and the way it all works chemically, that if you refine an ingredient and you strip it of some of those key nutrients, then you don't, who knows, you may be rendering it completely useless or completely fattening or whatever it may be. So I think just eating whole foods diet as much as possible, and plant-based is something that we personally believe as well, for the environment, and for our own personal wellness. Something that, plant-based vegan diet is something that's worked out really well for us. But it's there's a lot of different, obviously, nutritional theories. That's another good one. There's so much information out there. A lot of it is conflicting.
Yeah, so, like the paleo people. People, they wouldn't even eat gluten-free bread, right? Because they're just against all grains.
All grains, right, exactly. Yeah. Even though I do have to say that we have a lot of paleo customers, because paleo customers, or at least the ones that would eat our bread, like they wouldn't eat like wheat, rice, or corn, because those are varieties that have been bred to maximize like the starchy content, so they're not like the ancient variety. They're not the original varieties, and that's why they're kind of big, right? If you think of a rice or corn kernel, like it's big, right? It's like so when you compare that to like amaranth or quinoa, like people know those are much smaller, and it's because those have not been bred to like maximize the volume, the starchy part. So therefore they have more protein and fiber. So some paleo customers would still eat our bread, perhaps not as frequently, but they're okay with it, because even though it's agricultural product, it's grown on a field, it's like the ancient variety that's it's been around for a long time and hasn't been modified. So so I think there's definitely there's different variations of paleo, right? And people adhere to it in different ways. But yeah, there's so much, and that's another interesting subject, something we're really passionate about.
And there's people trying to just avoid all carbs and go ketogenic,
exactly.
And there's even paleo bread now, right? But they don't even use grains. How would you make a bread without grain, and how would you make a bread that doesn't have starch?
It's. I think they're cool products. It's not really quite like bread, because it's made from almond flour and coconut flour, and a lot of eggs to hold it all together. Oh, yeah. So when you do that, the bread's going to be very heavy. I think they can taste good. They can, but it's not quite like bread. It depends on your definition of bread, right? If you're willing to stretch it out,
and I'm sure the nutritional content and profile is completely different.
Right.
It doesn't have those minerals that are found in the grains.
Right, for sure. Yeah, and it's got a lot of fat and not very much carbs, a lot of protein, but that's what the paleo customer wants. And that, it's so interesting because there's so many nutritional theories out there. You have paleo, you have vegan, you have ketogenic, you have whole foods, plant-based, and they all seem to have good results. So I think it's a really interesting time right now when we as a culture realize that food makes a huge difference, and we're like, there are these different camps experimenting with all these different types of foods, and frankly, I believe that we do not know what the right diet is, right? And it may be different for every person.
That's what I think. I think it's like, I don't believe in the one-size-fits-all diet.
Right.
You really need to listen to your own body,
Exactly.
What's it telling you? Like, do you need more carbs? Do you need more fat? Like, what is your body saying?
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that is definitely a journey, maybe a lifelong journey, for each of us to figure out what the right foods are, and what do we want to achieve. For us, when we look at the food we make and our own food that we eat, the environment is a strong consideration. So I think as our population grows, when you look at the carbon footprint of meat, even good meat, it's just a lot greater than plants. So that's something that for us personally is important. But yeah, people have different opinions, and people try different things, and I think it's great that we're all trying, and it's great to keep an open mind and see what works out for all of us. Yeah, because we're all different, and who knows? What we'll learn. But I think it's so great, right, that we're like so actively after the food, and we're like, so we realize, oh man, like food can make so much difference in the world, right?
It's powerful.
It's so powerful, and I think it just affects, everything. Like, I think what you put in your body, it affects your mind, it affects who you become. So if you keep putting, crappy refined foods in you, then you're just not going to thrive. You're not going to reach your full potential as a human being. You're not going to live for very long to, enjoy all the joys in life and all the progress that you can make as a person that makes life so wonderful. So I think it's great that we're experimenting with food, and as I said, for us, gluten-free is a huge part of that, and hopefully for a lot of people.
Speaking of enjoying life, how long would you want to live? If you could live for any age, what would be your ideal age?
Yeah, that's funny. I know we had
forever.
Well, I know we had this conversation last night, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was saying like man, Rowan, like after 100 years, like wouldn't you just want to peace out? Like how much more there is? And you were saying that there is so much to life that it takes so long to discover. So yeah, I mean, I know it's a fun question, the thing that I haven't thought about for very much, but I would say that if I can remain my vitality, if I can continue improving, my body with exercise, my mind with meditation, exercises, right? Learning, as long as you can learn new things, make progress. Gosh, I mean, that's so much fun. So yeah, I mean, I would love to live for a couple hundred years just to see what we learn from the food, and what we learn from everything else that's going on with technology and climate change and just our progress as a species, So yeah, it would be, and another really good one, another thing that after talking to you, I was thinking is that if you live for a long time, you're gonna acquire so much experience, and your decisions will become so much better. You'll become such an enlightened person because you will have seen so much that would be a really interesting point to be 150 years old and like have the perspective on so much that I can definitely see the appeal in like living longer, because then you can really contribute to society. You can help, teach, education is another thing, such a fascinating subject, for us as a human race.
Just imagine the progress we'll make in a couple hundred years, how different the world's going to be.
Right.
I'm looking forward to seeing that.
Yeah. No, and me too. Yeah, and we may definitely have some downs, right, along the journey, and
for a couple thousand years. Think about that.
Yeah, that would be
a billion years.
That would be a completely different.
If the human race is still alive, that would be
a different story. Yeah.
So if people want to get your bread, where can they get it?
Oh gosh, yeah, thank you for asking. Yeah, we're based in Portland in Oregon, so the Northwest is our home base. We're just next week opening up, well, not next week, tomorrow is our actually first baking day at our new baking location in the Bay Area. So we're really excited to now produce here as well and supply our Bay Area or California stores from here. So I would say anywhere on the West Coast. So all of California, then Oregon, Washington, Nevada, Idaho, Montana, Arizona. So natural stores in that area. Whole Foods, it's obviously a big one. Co-ops and natural food stores. That's where most of those places would have our bread. Natural Grocers is a great account or a great store, great partner. So I would say natural food stores, or we also do online, so you can find our bread online and we ship to you. And yeah,
I had it this morning. I had a piece of the classy sliced bread on, and I had some peanut butter on it.
Nice,
honey,
nice.
It was delicious.
Oh, thank you.
I can't say enough about it. It was
thank
really
you.
Good.
Yeah.
I mean, it rivals any normal gluten bread.
Thank you. Yeah.
Really good.
Thank you. Yeah. And it's definitely something that we, the bread has to have the right ingredients, be healthy, wholesome, but also it's got to taste, it's got to taste good and have a nice texture, and you can make a sandwich and something that kids will enjoy too. So that's definitely we work really hard. As I said, we've been doing it for 7 years, and these are kind of our family recipes. I've done, since I do all the experiments, all the baking, I've done a few hundred experiments.
Wow.
So which maybe doesn't sound a lot, but it is a lot. It's like it's like for a couple of years, every other day, right? It's an experiment day.
Like a mad scientist bread.
Yeah, kind of, yeah.
Get to the bottom of what makes the best bread.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. And there's always more to learn, and the hard part is to come up with a bread that meets the taste and texture requirements, but doesn't compromise the promise that we make, the natural healthy promise. So we don't add like modified starches or enzymes or different kind of gums, in our bread, or dough conditioners, like all these things that make it way easier to make tasty bread. But it's something, again, I said, it comes to the whole food and chemicals and stuff and processing ingredients, something that we just could never feel good about including in our bread. So that's the challenge, come with a good bread that does not compromise on any of the natural promise that we make for our customers. Yeah.
Are you ever planning to branch out into like making gluten-free pizza crusts or any other interesting gluten-free products?
Yeah, we'd love to. It'd be great, but frankly, we have our hands, so full with the bread right now that. But yeah, in the future, we'd love to. I think it would be a lot of fun, but we'll just have to see, what's next. Yeah, I would say if anything, like our next thing would be another bread, maybe like a sourdough version.
Ooh, sourdough would be good.
Yeah, we talked about sprouted, like that would be, full-on sprouted bread would be something that we love to offer. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, it's been a great interview. Do you have a website you want to?
Oh yeah.
Plug?
Oh sure. Yeah. Thanks for asking. Yeah, it would be. You can see there www.happycampersgf.
And I'll put that in the description of this video.
Yeah, it's Happy Campers with an S. GF is in glutenfree.com. But you can check us out, and maybe I'll see you guys when I'm demoing around California this next month. Just going to stores, a lot of stores, natural food stores. Set up camp there, sample bread. Teach people if you have any questions, and let them sample our bread.
When you're sampling bread, do you put anything on it?
I don't.
Because you want them to experience the whole flavor of the
exactly.
bread.
Yeah, so it's a little bit of because it's nice to put something on it, right? Because that's how you'd normally eat it. But at the same time, I kind of like to just here's a plain piece of bread, like try a plain piece of bread, because it just seems like an honest way to try it out, rather than try to wrap it up with some decadent spread or something. It's just plain piece of bread.
Do you get some people who have like never tried gluten-free bread before?
Yeah,
they're like
for sure.
Totally surprised. They're like,
for sure.
What?
Yeah,
wow,
yeah.
This is really good.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, people are like, why don't you put any wheat in it? Like, well, it's something different. Yeah. All
right. Well, thank you for letting me interview you.
Of course.
And
yeah.
I wish you the best with your bread making endeavors. You have an awesome company, and everyone go check out. What's the Happy Campers? That's the company.
Right. It's no regular. Yeah. Well, thanks so much for the interview. Thanks for listening. Yeah, it's always fun to share, whatever we learn, and I look forward to baking more for you. Maybe talking to you again next time.
All right. Bye.
Peace.